So you're still washing cars, huh? My sister said loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm after 15 years of not seeing me. 15 years apart. I thought maybe they'd changed, perhaps they'd see me differently. But no, nothing had changed. The same condescending attitude, the same judgment. Stick around and hear my story. See how I gave them a lesson they won't forget. Hello everyone, my name is John Hamilton. I'm 33 years old and living in the suburbs of New York with my wife, Alina, and our two beautiful daughters, Emma, who's 5, and Grace, who's 3. They're my whole world. I'm the second child in a family that always revolved around my sister, Everly. She's 2 years older than me, and ever since we were kids, she's been the center of every party, every family gathering, every compliment. Not wanting to live in her shadow, I left home at 18, right after I asked my parents for help with college tuition, and they turned me down. From that day on, I promised myself I'd never go back. And for 15 years, I kept that promise. Until about a month ago, it was a regular weeknight. I was working on plans to open a new branch of my business when my phone rang. I looked at the screen, an unknown number. I almost left it on voicemail, but something told me to pick it up. Then a woman's voice came through. John, is that you? I froze. That voice. There was no mistaking it. I hadn't heard it in 15 years, but I still remembered every little tone in how she said my name. Mom! I blurted out, surprised and a little shaken. Yes, it's me. Her voice cracked. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I just wanted to know if you're okay. I was silent for a few seconds, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I couldn't believe this was happening. How did you get my number? I asked, my voice dropping. I've been keeping up with you quietly, she said softly. I still hear bits and pieces through some of the relatives. The ones you used to talk to before cutting ties. I never called before because you didn't want to hear from me. But this time is different. I closed my eyes, trying to keep my voice steady. What's different? She replied right away. Everly's birthday is next week. She's turning 35. We're throwing a small party at her place. Almost the whole family will be there. I thought, it would be nice if you came too, just this once, so everyone can see you again. I didn't answer right away. On the other end, she waited. After 15 years, now they suddenly want a reunion? With me, the one they cast aside like I never mattered? After a few seconds, I finally said, I'll think about it, Mom. Then I hung up. I sat frozen on the couch, still holding my phone loosely in one hand, the screen already dark. The call was over, but my mom's words kept echoing in my head. 15 years. And she just called me like nothing ever happened. Then I heard soft footsteps approaching. It was my wife. Alina walked over and handed me a cup of coffee. The moment she saw my face, she stopped in her tracks, eyes filled with concern. You okay? She asked gently, her voice full of care. I looked up and met her eyes, the eyes of the woman who had stood by me for nearly a decade, who knew me so well that one glance was all it took to know something was off. I gave a slight nod and said quietly, My mom called. My voice was still unsteady. Alina paused, clearly surprised. She sat down beside me, leaning in just a little. Your birth, Mom. I nodded, deep in thought. After 15 years. She called, to invite me to Everly's birthday party. Alina furrowed her brow, repeating it slowly, as if to make sure she heard right. I thought you didn't keep in touch with them anymore? I let out a long, heavy sigh that felt like it came from deep in my chest. I don't. But she said she got my number from a relative I used to talk to during those first few years after I left home. She said she's been quietly following my life from a distance. Just never dared to reach out until now. Alina stared at me for a moment, then spoke, her voice low. And now they want you back. After all these years of silence, I nodded again. This time, there was a bitter edge in my eyes. Because it's Everly's 35th birthday. They say the whole family's gonna be there. And they want me to come too. A so-called reunion. I gave a dry, joyless laugh. There was nothing warm in it, only the taste of old pain. Alina didn't say anything right away. She just placed her hand gently over mine, holding it with her familiar warmth. Then softly, she said, I know the pain from back then isn't easy to forget, but it's been 15 years, John. Maybe things have changed. If they're truly trying to make things right, maybe it's worth giving them a chance. And if they're not, at least you'll know. At least you won't keep wondering. I didn't answer. My eyes drifted toward the window. Outside, car lights flickered and danced across the living room wall. I heard Emma and Grace giggling as they watched a movie from the room down the hall. My real family, my world, was right here in this house. I murmured, primarily to myself, I don't know. I've gotten used to life without them. Alina turned toward me, her gaze calm and full of understanding. But if you don't go, will you ever stop wondering, what if things could have been different? I looked back at her, the woman who had seen every high and low of my life, who never once turned her back on me. I knew she wasn't asking me to forgive them no matter what. She just wanted peace for me. After a long pause, I gave a slow nod and said quietly but firmly, I'll think about it. Alina didn't say another word. She just leaned down and gently kissed my lips, then quietly walked into the kitchen. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone in the stillness, with only the ticking of the wall clock breaking the silence. I leaned back into the couch and closed my eyes, and then the memories came rushing in, so vivid. I could almost smell the familiar scent of food from the old kitchen in the house I grew up in, the place I used to call home, even though it never truly felt like mine. I remember being a kid and how Everly was always the perfect child to the adults. Everly has such a talent for drawing. She was born to be an artist. This painting needs to be entered in the city contest. And me? I was just John, the quiet little brother who sat alone with his toy cars or spent hours digging through old tools in the garage, taking things apart and putting them back together. No one ever called me creative. No one said I had passion. They just said I was odd, too quiet, and needed to be more social. At every family gathering, Everly was the star. She'd sit in the middle of the living room, playing guitar or showing off her latest artwork while everyone gathered around in awe. I'd sit in a corner, watching it all, wondering, do I even exist in this room? And during those moments, when Everly soaked in all the praise, my father would place a hand on my shoulder and say, you should try to be more like Everly. She's got talent and a clear direction. You mess around with toy cars all day. From family meetings to dinner conversations, from school stories to report cards, every glance, every compliment, every ounce of hope and pride was reserved for Everly. And me? I slowly learned how to become a shadow, quiet, unassuming, invisible. I remember that day so clearly. I got my acceptance letter from the local community college. It was a 2-year automotive technology program. For the first time, I felt like I had found my own path, a real chance to chase something I cared about. I walked into the living room, letter in hand, heart pounding with excitement and hope. Mom was folding laundry. Dad was reading the newspaper. I stood in front of them and said, my voice almost trembling from how thrilled I was, I got accepted into the automotive tech program. They offered a partial scholarship, but I'll still need about $3,000 to cover the rest of the first year's tuition. I was hoping for a smile, a well done, even just a nod, but all I got was an odd silence. Dad lowered his paper, glancing at me over his glasses. Mom paused, looking at him like she was waiting for him to go first. Then Dad spoke, his voice firm, like he was reading from a script he'd already prepared. John, you know we're focusing our finances on Everly right now. She just got into an arts program in Europe. Your mom's already put down a deposit on her tuition and flights. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What about me? I asked, my voice cracking. Mom let out a quiet sigh, her tone gentle but detached. Everly has a big opportunity, sweetheart. Well, it's automotive tech. You can always study that later or apply for more scholarships. Or work for a few years and save up. Dad nodded like it all made perfect sense. You can work and study. That's what I did back in the day. I stood there, still clutching the acceptance letter in my hand. Everything I had been so excited about suddenly felt pointless. To them, what I wanted didn't matter. I could always wait, do it later, figure it out. But for Everly, if she wanted something, the answer was always yes. That night, I packed my things. Just a worn-out backpack, a few changes of clothes, my beat-up shoes, and $300 I'd saved from working part-time at the garage down the road. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. No one walked me to the door. I left that house around dusk, just as a light rain began to fall. I remember turning back one last time, just once, then walking away without looking back. And from that moment on, I swore to myself, I would never ask them for anything again. Life after leaving home was a sharp turn. Cold, harsh, and unforgiving. In those early days, I wandered through neighborhoods on the city's edge, looking for work from morning till night. I lived off stale bread and slept on the waiting room bench of an old garage where I used to work part-time back in high school. The owner had retired, but the head mechanic Marco was still there. He was the first person to hand me an oil-stained rag and say, "I don't care who you were before. If you're willing to work, that's all that matters. Scrub wheels, clean windows, vacuum the interiors. Can you handle that?" I nodded without hesitation. That was all I needed, a chance. So I started with the dirtiest jobs. Scraping mud off rims, scrubbing gum off the floors, pushing cars out of the wash bay in the freezing winter. My hands cracked from the cold water. My nose went numb from the wind. But I never complained. Not once. I worked non-stop morning shifts, evening shifts whenever Marco needed someone. There were days it poured so hard the water soaked through my pant legs, icy and sharp, but I kept my head down, wiping down cars without a single complaint. Marco noticed. He didn't say much, but I could feel it. The way he looked at me changed gradually every day. Then came that Saturday afternoon. I was washing a black sedan when I heard a familiar laugh coming from the lot outside. I looked up, and my heart dropped. Everly. She stood there, arms crossed, wearing a designer coat and sunglasses, flanked by our two cousins, Max and Colin. The same two who used to make fun of me when we were kids. Well, John," Everly said with a smirk, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still scrubbing undercarriages, huh?" I didn't say a word, just kept working, but my skin burned with shame. Max nudged Colin, glancing around the garage and shaking his head. "This place reeks of oil. Can't believe someone chooses to stay in a dump like this their whole life." They laughed. They didn't need to spell it out. I knew exactly what they thought. I didn't respond. I stood up, grabbed the hose, and washed the mud off my hands. I was used to being looked down on. But seeing them there, laughing like nothing had changed, cut more profound than the winter wind howling outside. As I was drying the garage floor that night, my phone rang. It was the home number. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then answered. "John!" My dad's voice barked through the line, full of irritation. "Why did you let your family see you doing that low-life job?" I gripped the phone tighter, trying to stay calm. "I'm working honestly. I don't steal. I don't owe anyone anything. I'm earning a living on my own." "Washing cars," he snapped. "Aren't you ashamed? People will think we failed to raise you right." The words caught in my throat. I swallowed hard and said slowly, "I asked you and Mom to help me attend trade school once. Just a small amount. You said no. So now I'm doing it on my own." There was a brief silence. Then my mom cut in, her voice softer, but just as cold. "You could still work and study at the same time, John. Your father did. No one forced you to choose this path." I let out a dry laugh, one with no trace of humor. "Then why didn't Everly have to work and study? Why didn't you say that to her?" Silence again. A moment later, my dad muttered flatly, "Do what you want, but don't expect us to introduce you as part of this family if you live like this." The line went dead. No goodbye. No how are you. Just rejection all over again. About a week after that phone call from my parents, I was under an old pickup, changing the oil, when Marco walked in. He stood behind me for a long moment, arms crossed, just watching. I didn't notice until I heard his voice behind me. "You work non-stop. I never asked for a day off. Never late. Even guys here for years don't keep up like that." I stood up and wiped my hands on a rag. "I just want to do my part well," I said. Marco looked at me for a moment, thoughtful, then nodded toward a truck on the lift. "That one's a V8. Old transmission system. You know how to strip and reassemble it." I shook my head. "Never done it. But I can learn." He gave a slight nod. "Good. Stay late tonight. I'll show you." That night was the first time I stepped into the central tech bay, the part of the garage I used to only clean and keep my distance from. Marco walked me through the basics. How to recognize engine noises, read spec sheets, check air filters, spark plugs, oil brakes. One step at a time. Over the following weeks, I kept doing daytime wash jobs, then stayed at night to learn the trade. Marco didn't say much, but I could feel it. He was starting to trust me. He let me watch the leading techs at work, slowly giving me small tasks, removing tires, checking pressure, inspecting belts. One evening, after we closed up shop, Marco handed me a piece of paper. Community Tech School. Night classes. In the 2-year program, you get certified at the end. I know the guy who runs it. If you're serious, I'll write you a recommendation. I took the paper in my hands, staring at the info, my hands trembling just a little. I can pay in installments, I said quietly. I'll work more hours. Marco waved a hand. Don't worry about that. I'll cover the first year. Call it an investment in future staff. But after that, you're on your own. I was speechless. Not because I was surprised someone offered help, but because, for the first time in my life, someone believed I was worth investing in. So I started school at night. Days in the garage. Evenings rushing to class. Cold noodles out of a Tupperware for dinner. Theory and hands-on work till late at night. Some days, I was so exhausted I passed out at the small table in the break room. But I never quit. Not once. 2 years passed faster than I ever expected. By day, I worked at the garage. At night, I was in class, studying automotive technology. On weekends, I carved out time to review theory and even picked up extra lessons in shop management and customer service. Things Marco told me. They won't teach you that in school, but it's what'll keep you in the game. Eventually, I was trusted with more complex jobs. Engine removals, ABS brake repairs, and using diagnostic tools for advanced issues. My name started appearing in the official tech assignment book, not as the helper or that kid who washes cars, but as a technician. A year after I got certified, Marco made it official. He promoted me to lead technician. You handle the tough jobs better than guys who've been here 10 years, he said during a quick team meeting. From now on, anything tricky goes to John. I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just a title. It was validation. But Marco wasn't done yet. One early spring afternoon, as I was closing out the day's books in the back office, he stepped in and said, "Ever thought about running a shop?" I looked up, surprised. "Managing? You mean, like a branch?" Marco pulled up a chair, his tone serious. "I'm thinking about reopening our old location in East Brooklyn. It used to be my brother's shop. Now it's just sitting there, empty. The small 3 lifts, 1 tiny office. But I need someone solid to run it. And no one's more qualified than you." I sat there in silence for a few seconds. The phrase shop manager sounded both distant and full of pressure. "I've never managed anything before," I admitted. Marco leaned back, arms crossed with a small smile. "And I've never trained anyone the way I've trained you. But I see something in you. You have the skills, the drive, and most importantly, you listen to people. Everything else I can teach you." I swallowed hard and gave a nod. "I'll give it everything I've got." Marco stood up, placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You don't have to give it everything. Just keep doing what you've been doing. The rest will come." 2 months later, I officially became the manager of the Brooklyn branch. I hired 2 technicians and 1 front desk staff member. I redesigned the waiting area myself and reorganized the tools and lifts based on what I'd learned in school. The first month's revenue wasn't high, but almost every customer returned. We offered honest service and fair pricing, and most importantly, I remembered every face and every car that came through those doors. Marco would stop by for routine checks, and each time he'd smile, genuinely pleased. 3 years after being manager, the Brooklyn branch wasn't just stable, it was thriving beyond expectations. Revenue grew steadily quarter after quarter, and our customer return rate was the highest in the system. I didn't just focus on repairs. I studied how to hire the right people, retain them, build a budget, run ads on social media, and create an authentic brand. Every time Marco came by to review the books, I saw the surprise and pride on his face. "You run a tighter ship than I ever did," he'd say, nodding with a satisfied smile. One Friday afternoon, Marco invited me back to the primary office after closing the shop. The space was small and softly lit, with that familiar smell of old coffee lingering in the air. He pulled open a drawer, took out a thin folder, and slid it across the desk toward me. "John, I'm planning to open a new branch on the city's north side," he said. "It's an up-and-coming neighborhood. Not many garages around. Big potential." I nodded. "That sounds like a great idea." But Marco didn't respond right away. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "But I don't want to do it alone this time." I frowned, confused. Marco leaned forward, serious. "I want you to invest. Be my partner. 50-50. My heart stopped. "Me?" I stammered. "You've proven you've got what it takes," he said. "I'm not looking for someone to bring in a pile of money. I'm looking for someone who knows how to run a shop. Someone who cares about every customer, every bolt, every detail. You can take out a small business loan, I'll co-sign. I want to share this with someone. And I want that someone to be you. At that moment, as I looked down at the contract with the words co-owner printed at the top, it felt like I was watching a new chapter of my life unfold. I had once been the kid who walked away from home with nothing but a bag and a rag to wipe down wheels. Now, I was being invited to become part of something bigger, something I had built with my own two hands. I looked up, met Marco's eyes, and said, "I'm in." Our new branch opened that spring, right in a growing residential area on the north side of New York. The space wasn't big, but it sat on a busy street, just a few blocks from a new apartment complex still under construction. I handled hiring, setting up the workflow, and coordinating with suppliers. Marco stayed in the background, offering guidance when needed, but he gave me complete control. We didn't launch with flashy ads or grand openings. I just put up a simple sign out front. "We take care of your car like we take care of ourselves." It was just a slogan, but it was the philosophy I had learned from Marco. The first customer came out of curiosity. The second came because it was on their way. The third came because the first two had good things to say. 3 months later, we were fully booked every week. The new shop in the north was hitting its stride. I spent most of my time there, doing everything. Fixing cars, managing the team, talking to customers, answering phones. Everything I'd learned in my management courses suddenly felt real, and way more challenging than it ever looked on paper. I worked until 10 p.m., most nights. Some days, I'd sleep at the shop, grab a few hours on the break room couch, and then wake up early to catch the first drop-offs. But I never complained, because for the first time in my life, I was building something truly mine. Marco still dropped by every weekend. He'd review the books, check the tools, and give me sharp but thoughtful notes. Then, one afternoon, after looking over our monthly report, he looked up and said suddenly, "Have you thought about opening another branch?" I looked at him, caught off guard. He continued before I could answer, "We've got the resources. If this pace keeps up, we could open a new location every year. But this time, I want you to take the lead. You sign the lease. You run the show. I'll back you from behind the scenes." I looked at him, heart full of gratitude. "I'll give it serious thought," I said. Marco nodded. "Good. I'll be waiting for the good news." After that, I threw myself into expansion. Marco and I spent weeks scouting new locations, building standardized procedures for each shop, training staff, and tightening our finances. All those things I used to read about in textbooks, I was now applying in the real world, hands-on every single day. But it was right in the middle of all that chaos, when I was stretched thin, barely eating lunch most days, that I met Alina. Not at a party. Not through some friend of a friend setup. On a rainy afternoon, I was elbows deep in back-to-back repairs. Alina pulled up in an old hatchback, the engine making a knocking noise and warning lights blinking all over the dash. She stepped into the shop with tired eyes, clutching a folder full of paperwork, and asked, "Could you check it real quick? I've got a meeting I can't miss." I was the only one who wasn't tied up at that moment. I nodded, popped the hood, and gave it a quick look. "False sensor alert," I said without looking up. "Nothing serious. Just needs a reset and a cleanup on the connectors." Her eyes widened. "That's it?" A shop told me I needed to replace the whole system. I shrugged. "I don't replace what doesn't need replacing. I fix cars. I don't sell problems." She smiled. "Not the polite kind. A real one." "Well then," she said, "I owe you a coffee next time." I smiled back. "Black. No sugar." And sure enough, the next time she came back. 2 cups of black coffee, no sugar, and 2 breakfast sandwiches in a paper bag. "You skip breakfast, don't you?" "Thought so," she said, setting the bag on the front counter with a small smile. That's how we started, simple, easy, no show. Alina worked at a nearby community center and passed by the garage almost daily. Sometimes, she'd stop in just to ask a quick question about her car, but would end up staying until I locked the doors. I've never been excellent at expressing emotion, but with her, everything felt lighter. She didn't ask how much I made. She didn't care how many branches I had. She just listened, really listened. A few months later, I asked her to go with me to an outdoor screening of an old movie, something I hadn't done with anyone since leaving home. That night, she sat next to me, eyes quietly focused on the screen, and when her hand brushed mine, it was warm, steady, and full of trust. We got married a year later. No fancy ceremony, no grand hall, no extravagant gown. It was just a backyard wedding at a friend's place, surrounded by friends, coworkers, and Marco, the one man who had ever given me a second chance. Marco stood beside me as I waited for Alina to walk out. He gave my shoulder a firm pat and said quietly, "You've come a long way, John, from a kid scrubbing wheels to this." Then I saw Alina walking toward me in a simple white dress, her smile as gentle as the early morning sun. And right then, I knew. No matter how far my family had turned their backs, no matter how cold the past had been, I had finally found a place to call home. Alina and I have been married for 6 years now. Our 2 little girls, Emma, 5, and Grace, 3, are the sweetest miracles I've ever known. Every morning, their giggles echoing from the next room are all the motivation I need to start the day. Not for money or status, but simply because I know exactly what I'm living for. My life now is so peaceful. Sometimes I must remind myself it's real. We live in a spacious house in the western suburbs of New York, 3 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for the kids' slide and Alina's vegetable garden. I bought that house with the savings from the first 3 years after becoming a partner. No loans, no inheritance. No one else's name is on the deed. The car I drive now is a 7-seater SUV. Not to show off, but to take my whole family on weekend getaways. The old sports sedan I once dreamed of, still in the garage dusty now. Because these days, I'm busy being a father, a husband, and the owner of a life I once thought I'd never have. Every night after the girls are asleep, Alina and I sit out back, sipping hot tea, talking about things like whether to move Grace from preschool into a Montessori program, or should we hire another tech now that the new branch is about to open. We don't throw lavish parties. We don't eat at 5-star restaurants every week. But we have everything a family truly needs. Love, respect, and a safe place to come home to. There was a time I dreamed my family would finally see that I'm no longer that quiet John living in Everly's shadow. But eventually I realized I don't need them to see it. I've made it this far, without them walking beside me. As I sat there, lost in thought, watching the sky outside turn a brilliant shade of orange, a small voice called out from the next room, "Daddy, my cake fell over." It was Emma, my 5-year-old, hard at work making toy cakes with her little sister. I chuckled and stood up, hurrying into the room. While Emma frowned at her lopsided foam cake, Grace was busy stirring milk in a pink plastic cup. I sat between them, gently straightening the toy cake, and kissed her forehead. "There you go, princess. Cake's all fixed now." "Thank you, Daddy," Emma beamed, throwing her arms around my neck. I looked at the 2 of them, these bright, pure little souls who had become the center of my world, and let out a long, quiet breath. Maybe it was time to close an old chapter. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. That night, while Alina was putting the girls to bed, I picked up my phone, scrolled to the number my mother had called from, and typed a single message, "I'll come." Then I hit send. The birthday party was set for Monday, exactly 1 week after my mother's call. After I sent my message confirming I would come, she replied with the address just minutes later. A new house in a residential area on the south side of the city. Everly's new place. She'd moved in not long ago. I didn't say anything to Alina right away. I just saved the address on my phone. And then Monday came. At 6 p.m., the 4 of us stood at the front gate of that house. I stepped out of the car and looked up. 2 stories, porch lights glowing, simple flag garlands and balloons decorating the front. Bright and cheerful, almost theatrical. The door was already open, voices and laughter spilling out. Lively, familiar, and yet strangely distant. I reached for Alina's hand. She gave me a soft nod, her eyes calm and steady. I knelt to retie Emma's shoelace, brushed a strand of hair from Grace's forehead, and stood tall. "Let's go," I said. "Let them see what a real family looks like." I stepped through the doorway with a steadier heart than I expected. My left hand held tightly onto Alina's. My right rested gently behind Emma and Grace. It is a natural reflex of a father to shield his family. The inside of the house was bright, almost blinding. The mix of perfume and party food created that familiar, artificial scent I remembered from old family gatherings. Polished, showy, but never sincere. The living room was vast and decorated with balloons, ribbons, and a large sign that read, "Happy Birthday, Everly, the family's precious gem." I nearly laughed. Everly's voice rang out from the dining area, crisp and confident, surrounded by a cluster of familiar relatives. The same ones once called me the odd one, or the kid who washes cars. The sound of the door shutting behind us caught their attention. Heads turned. A brief pause, like someone had pressed the mute button. Then the whispers began. Slow, predictable, eyes darting from person to person, faces shifting between surprise, disbelief, and discomfort. John? My mother's voice cut through the silence. She quickly set down a tray of pastries and stepped forward, her expression flustered and awkward, like she hadn't believed I would come, let alone bring my whole family. It's you. I gave a slight nod. Yeah, it's me. I glanced around the room and offered a polite, reserved smile. Hello, everyone. Alina gave a respectful nod beside me. The girls clung to her side, peeking shyly from behind her legs, just like any kids in a room full of strangers. The living room seemed to hold its breath. Then my aunt, the one who once said, John never quite fit in with this family, stepped forward with a stiff smile. Oh, John, it's been a while, huh? And who are these little ones? I knelt, gently brushing Emma's hair from her face. My daughters, this is Emma, and that's Grace. No one quite knew what to say next. Just then, Everly turned around. She was holding a glass of red wine. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, pausing briefly on the crisp white button-down I'd chosen that morning. In her gaze, I could read it all. Surprise, yes, but also irritation. John, she said, smiling, but not really. You came. I held my smile, small, calm, grounded. Mama invited me, and it's been a long time. Everly nodded, her eyes flicking toward Alina and the kids, assessing, comparing, and looking for something to critique. Come in, make yourself at home, she said, stepping aside. I led my wife and children in, guiding them to a table near the window. Not in the center, but not hidden either, just enough distance to observe without being swallowed by the performance. No one asked much else. They just watched, like they were trying to figure out how the quiet, forgotten boy, the one they wrote off, mocked, left behind, I was now standing here, unshaken, whole, with a family of his own. And maybe that quiet, undeniable presence, that was what unsettled them the most. Everly's birthday party unfolded precisely as I'd imagined, loud, artificial, and centered around one person. My sister. She was mid-story, talking about some art project out on the East Coast, when she suddenly turned to me. With that familiar half-smirk, she raised her voice just enough for the whole room to hear. John, so you're still washing cars, huh? The words cut through the air like a slap. The room went silent. I could feel the eyes turning toward me, a few tight-lipped smiles, sideways glances full of unspoken things. But I didn't get angry. I didn't feel embarrassed. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a thick, embossed, silver-edged business card with the Vanguard Auto Center's logo in the corner, and placed it gently on the table before the nearest guest. Mind passing this to Everly for me? I said calmly. The card began to make its way around the table. Some glanced at it in silence. Others read it carefully, then looked back at me like they were seeing something entirely new. When it reached my cousin Matt, the same one who once laughed out loud watching me scrub bumpers back in the day, he squinted, reading aloud, Vanguard Auto Centers, what is this? Then he pulled out his phone and started typing. The room was so quiet you could hear his fingers tapping the screen. And then, Matt shot up from his seat, eyes wide in disbelief. Yo, this is real, he nearly shouted. John Hamilton, co-founder and CEO of the biggest auto service chain in New York State. 12 locations, he's in Business Weekly. Dude, there's even photos. All eyes locked on him. No one was eating. No one was speaking. Matt, now more excited than I was, kept reading out loud from the top of the search results. John Hamilton is the co-founder and CEO of Vanguard Auto Centers, a statewide network of auto maintenance and repair centers known for top-tier customer service and industry-leading technician training programs. Then he slowly lowered the phone and turned to me, half grinning in disbelief. That's you. I nodded once. Slowly. That's me. Everly was still standing, wine glass frozen in her hand, lips parted but speechless. Her face had drained of its usual glow, no more smugness or control. I turned to her, my voice calm but clear. You're not wrong. I did wash cars. And from that rag, I cleaned off every trace of the past. Then I looked around the room, at all the faces that once dismissed me, ignored me, left me behind, now staring, stunned, unsure what to do with the version of me standing before them. I'm not here for praise. I don't need anyone's pride. I want you all to know, I'm still John, just not the John you remember. I stood up, gently lifting Grace, who had dozed off in my arms, then reached for Emma's hand. Alina, let's go. My wife rose beside me, eyes steady, just as calm as when we walked in. The room stayed silent. The only sound was our footsteps as we made our way out, strong, sure, not needing anyone's approval. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice call out, John, I'm proud of you. I paused, didn't turn around. I just said loud enough for the whole room to hear. So the first time you're proud is when Google confirms it. Then I walked out, pushed open the door, and left behind a party where no one was laughing anymore. The next morning, I woke up just like any other day. Sunlight poured softly through the kitchen curtains. Alina was at the counter making breakfast. The girls were still sound asleep in their room. Everything was quiet, peaceful, precisely like the feeling I carried when we left that party the night before. At 8 a.m., my phone started buzzing on the table. Once, twice, then again. They'd found my number. It was printed on the back of the business card I'd handed out, beneath the Vanguard Auto Center's logo, under the title co-founder and CEO. The messages came in one after another. John, last night was just a misunderstanding. Everyone's proud of you. You did great. Caught us all by surprise. Can we talk? Your mom wants to reconnect. We should try to heal. Everly's upset. Could you have been a little gentler? I scrolled through them all. Didn't respond. Not out of anger. Not because I was hurt, but because I'd already moved on. 15 years ago, I was the one hoping they'd call. Hoping they'd check in. I'm hoping for a single word of recognition. Now, they were the ones reaching out, trying to hold on to something they once so quickly let go. Alina walked over, handed me a cup of coffee, and gently touched my shoulder. More messages? I nodded, taking a slow sip. Ever since they found out I don't scrub tires anymore, I said. They suddenly remember how to say family. She smiled softly, saying nothing. I just gave my shoulder a quiet squeeze. Enough to remind me. My real family is right here. No need to look anywhere else. That afternoon, as I reviewed the launch plan for our 13th branch in Long Island, my phone rang. Unknown number. No name. No clue. I let it ring 3 times before answering. John? Everly's voice came through, softer than usual, missing its usual edge. I know. I didn't handle things right last night. I'm sorry. Really. I didn't mean for it to get so tense. She paused, but in the background, I caught faint murmurs. I narrowed my eyes. She had me on speaker. And just as I suspected, my mother's voice cut in. Sweetheart, I want to talk too. I know I haven't been fair over the years, but I want the family to be close again. Then came my father's voice, low and trying too hard to sound reasonable. We're family, John. Nobody's perfect, but you shouldn't hold a grudge forever over the past. Before I could respond, Everly chimed in again, her voice quiet but crystal clear. I'm dealing with a bit of financial trouble. One of my art projects lost its funding. If you could help, maybe just a loan around $100,000. I'd pay it back in time. I froze just for a second. Before I could even react, my mother rushed in. Yes, dear. Helping your sister is helping the family. It's not like we're strangers. We're your people. My voice came out steady low, but every word landed sharp. No family, I said, slow and precise, would pour everything into one child's overseas dream and tell the other to figure it out independently. Don't say that, my mother fumbled. Back then things were different, and now, I cut in. I will block every number tied to this family. If you contact me again, or my wife, or contact my company, I'll involve the police. Silence, long and deep. Then my father's voice came back, no longer calm but bitter and biting. You should be thanking me. If I had helped you back then, maybe you wouldn't be where you are today. I smirked, and replied slowly, Thank you, Thomas Hamilton. Then I hung up. Not Dad, not Father, just Thomas Hamilton. A man who once brought me into the world, but never once lived up to the word father. I blocked the number, blocked every follow-up message as they came in. Then I stepped out into the backyard, where Emma and Grace were laughing, chasing each other in the golden light of the late afternoon. And in that moment, there was nothing left to prove, nothing to explain, only this, only them, and the life I had built without ever needing to look back. It's been a month since that birthday party. Life has returned to its quiet rhythm. If anything, it feels even lighter now. No more messages. No more calls. No more lingering cuts from the past trailing behind me like shadows I forgot I was still carrying. And I know I made the right choice. Not because I wanted to sever ties, but because some relationships, if held on to too long, only keep you from ever becoming yourself. Family, real family, should be where you're loved, heard, accepted, even before you succeed. But if family is the first place to turn its back on you, how can you blame yourself for finally turning yours? I have no regrets. Only one quiet wish: that thing could have started from a place of fairness and love instead of favoritism and expectation. And before I wrap up today's story, I want to ask you, the incredible listeners who stayed with me to the end, was I wrong to walk away from the people who share my blood? Drop a comment below. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. And if the story meant something to you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel something real, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means the world to us. It's what keeps us going, telling stories that aren't sugar-coated or shiny, but honest enough to touch the heart. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the following story.